Anyway, so going back to the impact of
Yes.
Silicon Valley Bank.
Yes.
Right. So a little bit of backstory about Silicon Valley Bank is Silicon Valley Bank around 2019, right before the COVID pandemic, they were like a smaller bank. I think like their estimated total of like money that they've taken in was about $50 billion, which is a lot of fucking money.
That's crazy. So that's small.
Well, but
so
I mean, like if at the peak, if they were at number 16, you know, and I'll say the next number because over the next 2.5 years, they went from 50 billion to 250 billion.
Oh,
that's
my
billion
God.
with a B. In
Wow.
a 2-year stint, that's a massive, massive growth, right? So, and that
We got all those tech guys in Silicon Valley. Big money.
Exactly, and that's the thing, right? Is that now you know they're like a heavy hitter in the game, and a little bit of the backstory on that is that like before COVID, what made them like an appealing bank company, or at least to what I have read, is that they weren't as restrictive on loans. So like if they had people coming in and you're like, hey, I need money for a donut shop and I need like $5 million to do that, right? You know, and you're like, okay, well, what do you do for like how much money do you have? You're like, I got about $15. You know? So like they're not going to do that, right? And traditionally that's how banks work, right? I mean, if you're going in for a bank loan, you got to be able to show that you have money, assets, things that they can leverage. If your business fails, they'll take all your shit, right? So in this case, what set them aside from some of the larger banks is that they were a little bit more friendly or more like to riskier options. Now, the majority of the loans that they were giving out as business loans were for a lot of tech companies. You know, in the last 10 years, tech's obviously quadrupled over the time. They probably were willing to risk it for the biscuit. Hey. But yeah, ring it. That was so dumb. Sorry.
Ring the biscuit.
No, the biscuit for the biscuit.
Let's give you a new shirt to sell online, dude. George's face on it.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, no. So anyways, that's how they gained popularity, right? Then over the time period of COVID, when you had a massive, massive influx of tech booming, right? I mean, we remember looking at the market, you know, it was like COVID hit and it was like the market crashed and it was down very low. If you don't want to call it a crash, it was fucking, things were cheap to buy, you know. Well, in the process of that, I mean, look at cryptocurrency, look at all these tech companies coming up with these different, you know, like lithium batteries, EFTs, NFTs, or not EFTs, but NFTs. And, you know, so this company was all over it. You know what I mean? And that catapulted them in a 2-year span to gain $150 billion, which is not typical for the size and the amount of people investing, right? Or how long they've been around type situation. So anyways, that's kind of how they got popular and big. What they did is that they ended up taking that money and instead of like kind of diversifying into a lot of different things, because that's what banks do, like we were saying earlier, that they take your money, they reinvest it so they can make money, and then they give you like a fucking fraction of a percentage, but it's something to keep your money there, right? So they did something that a lot of banks do, but they just did it in a larger fashion. They ended up investing more so into bonds. Right. And at the time, it, you know, I mean, look, again,
that's federal, so people know.
Correct.
Bonds are federal.
Like, remember when your grandparents gave you, or if your grandparents gave you a $5 bond, they're like, in 50 years, it'll be worth like $50. That's crazy return. It didn't happen at that time. So it seemed probably pretty good, right?
Right.
But anyway, so it's like that, but on a very large scale, you know? So instead of it being $5, it's $5 billion. You know what I mean? And it's typically a safe, slow return. What they did not account for was the federal interest rate at the time, or from the National Reserve Bank. You know, we were at 0. You know, that's when everyone was refinancing their house. There was a lot of things going on, but still at the time, the interest rate stayed at 0. Or, no, I'm sorry.
It was low.
Their interest rate was at 0. Our interest rates was like 3 or 4%. You know, like if you're going to try to buy a house at the time. So what they didn't account for was that the Federal Bank Reserve, God dang it, I'm messing this up. But anyways, they started raising the rates. You know, so now going from 0 to this amount, which they did not account for. So then they were probably like, oh shit, all this money that we have in there, like we're starting to lose, and now it's not looking good in the short term to keep that money in there. So what did they do? They tried to sell.
Actually, real quick, hold that thought. Okay, so the Fed's knowing that people are getting bonds, and they have to have records knowing that Silicon Valley Bank has so many of theirs at such a high cost. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you think they would know, hey, this might fold this bank, which is a bad thing, very bad thing for our citizens. So we have to be careful about rising interest rates, raising interest
Exactly.
rates.
Yes.
So it's like they knew, but still did it.
They had to have known.
Right?
Well, I mean,
That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, wait a minute, dude.
for every one of these moves, dude, there's a group of people that are talking about this shit before it happens. Whether you're either the Federal Reserve, where you're the one issuing the bonds, or you're the people for Silicon Valley Bank and you're trying to purchase the bond. Dude, it's a lot of communication. It's
Analysis.
It's not like you and me just sitting here and you're like, look, dude,
Right, what do you
I'm going to throw you $5 billion. You good?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're like, solid investment.
Let's do it.
It's good. Let's do it. And then we just, high five and we're good. I mean, there's a lot of like legal processing and analytics that go into all this stuff, which even then, I'm not saying that was incorrect at the time, because if you're like, hey, we're going to smart money, right? You know what? Hey, we're not going to get as much, but you know what? We have so much now that even having a very slight, a slight return is going to be more than enough to be able to cover everyone, just in case people start branching off and they have to make payouts and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So when this happened, it made everyone panic. And when they tried selling the bonds, they got deep. They got screwed, right? So now they lost a bunch. And then everything else started to crumble. So when they had the big loss, then all of a sudden you start getting chatter from the internals. Some people posted some things online that made it sound like they were going to start crumbling. And what does that do? That makes someone who has your money in the bank would be like, holy shit, dude, my life savings in this bank. I'm going to get it out, right? So now I'm gonna say this was a quote. So if I'm wrong with the numbers, send us a DM and tell me I'm an idiot, and I'll apologize for it. But it was in a